Yes. How we spend our time is how we spend our lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Flex the muscle, right? Joy is a muscle to be flexed. I think hope is a muscle to be flexed. And I would say that courage is as well. Certain things I will not debate. I will not debate my humanity. That's not up for debate, right?
It is so easy for our brains to think joy is for the good times and trauma is for the bad times, but time actually is all inclusive. You're listening to Solving for Joy. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissy Ott, a multi-boarded integrative physician and professional certified life and career coach. This podcast is about joy, what it means, how we find it, and the creative ways people are solving for it in their own lives. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I am very grateful and honored to bring my friend, Dr. Kemia Sarraf, to you today. Dr. K, as she is well known, is an internist, the CEO of Lodestar Coaching, a trauma-informed coach and public health professional. And she runs a small working farm in Illinois with her amazing husband of over 20 years and is mom to 4 sons. Kemia is one of my true inspirations in this field. And I have to tell you that 4 years ago now, she was one of the keynote speakers at the Physician Coaching Summit. And the day that we spent talking about trauma-informed coaching has lingered with me in more ways than imaginable. So it is truly an honor to call her friend and to get to share a conversation here with you today. Welcome, Dr. K.
Thank you. Can you believe it's been that long?
I can't.
Sheesh. It feels like yesterday, and it feels like decades ago. I mean, I guess time has been weird that way.
That's right. I remember meeting you, and then we also had the, KFG group in common, which is a Facebook group for women physicians who have supported a beloved through a cancer journey. You were way past
coming on the back
nadir
end.
of
I was on the
yours.
back end of that, and you were in the middle of it, as I recall.
Yep. That's right. I was just diving in. But it's so heartening and fortifying to know that that community exists. If there's anybody out there who doesn't know and who needs that, it exists, and it's an amazing resource for people. We love to talk about joy and all the different ways people solve for joy. I'm really interested in bringing in some really personal joys for you, and also thinking about the concept of joy as it relates to your work in trauma-informed coaching and in trauma-responsive public health education. So I'll start with just what's been bringing you extra joy lately? What has been delighting you and bringing you meaning and alignment?
The work. It's such an interesting time that we're in, because you would think, and sometimes it is, you would think that joy would be pretty hard to come by, honestly. When we look around and we see all that is being dismantled, destroyed, harmed deliberately.
Yes.
And a lot of the I think the challenge is in facing down the deliberateness of it all. And, Dan Savage, who's a well-known activist, once wrote that while joy can feel irreverent, joy matters very, very much. And I'm butchering the quote a little bit, but you'll stay with me, I hope, which is that he used to say that at the height of the AIDS epidemic, we buried our dead in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced at night. And it was the dance that kept us in the fight. And I think that the lesson in that is that it is the joy that reminds us why we do the things that we do. Activist burnout, or activist trauma, which is really the more accurate assessment of what's happening, is a very, very, very real and very frequent thing that I encounter. In much in the same way that I encountered first responder burnout and trauma, physician burnout and trauma, all of these things. And it is the challenge, I think, is to navigate the polarity of all of it, right? Holding the reality of what is right now in one hand and the hope for what we are going to do, what we may do, what we can do in the other. So it's the work that's bringing me joy. It really is. The work and the people, because they're inextricably entwined.
Yeah. There is a lot to be gained when we are doing the work that is the most meaningful to us. We are being of service to the greater good, how we understand it. And I really appreciate the bringing up the paradox of finding joy in the dark times, which is certainly something that comes up over and over again. I think that it is a drumbeat worth listening to because it is so easy for our brains to think joy is for the good times and trauma is for the bad times, but time actually is all inclusive. It is a buffet of paradox and polarity at the same time.
Well, and it's such a muscle to flex, right? I think we don't often maybe frame it up that way, but hope, joy, these are muscles that we flex in the same way that courage is a muscle that we flex.
Mm-hmm.
If what we're looking for is spun candy and easy, cheap access to these things, now is not the time that's going to happen. These are muscles that we need to flex, and we need to flex them repeatedly, because if we don't hold on to that part as we navigate all of this, we're going to lose something essential about who we are. I mean, I think I'm more concerned about what it drives us to become if we lose that than I am of what we do in the meantime. I think it drives us to become less of who we meant to be in the world.
It doesn't get more important than that, in my opinion. And you talked about the people, one of your tenets and truths that you echo over and over again is connection mitigates trauma. And that's, that was the one thing you hoped that we would remember from that day. And it is certainly one of the many things that I remember that day. But connection mitigating trauma requires us to notice other people, requires us to be present in our own bodies, requires presence, and keeps us from being isolated with whatever, the mind of hope and fear and trauma is left with.
Yeah, I think it's helpful, especially for physicians and other sciencey minded kinds of people, to think about the neuroscience that underpins that, right?
Yeah, tell
Because
us.
because connection itself can be challenging right now. Connection itself
Yeah,
can be challenging right now, and it's
yeah,
been challenging for a while. But it can be really, really challenging when we have been or felt unsafe for a prolonged period of time. So really, if you think about, sort of neurobiologically, evolutionarily, we are hardwired in a couple of different ways. I mean, we are hardwired to scan for threat. Now, the flip side of that coin is we are hardwired to seek safety. We're hardwired to look for, assess those cues that tell me I am safe or I am not safe. And the challenge in all of this is that this really, really exquisite threat detection system that we have is not reacting to the moment. It's reacting to everything that has happened to us previously. So it's scanning my environment. It's picking up these very, very subtle cues sometimes, and it's making a decision nanosecond by nanosecond about whether I am safe or not safe. And if, based on previous experience, the decision is that I am not safe, then I am almost instantaneously thrown into one of four sort of dominant responses: fight, flight, freeze, submit. Folks are very familiar with that. The challenge with times like these is that all of us are scanning more diligently, right? We've upregulated our scan.
Mhm.
Many of us have had additional exposure to unsafety, unsafe environments, unsafe encounters that have further upregulated our scanning. And simultaneously with that, like, our set point for activation is being lowered. That threshold for threat activation is being lowered by this repeated exposure. I mean, the dose makes the poison. And so understanding that, recognizing that in ourselves allows us to begin to get curious I think one thing I heard you say, right, like be in our bodies, notice what's happening in our bodies. We oftentimes become very, very disconnected from everything that's like neck down. And medical school, for those, of your listeners who are physicians, medical school kind of does that deliberately. Medical school, residency, fellowship, all of the training, right? I mean, we train ourselves to ignore embodied signals.
Yes, we do.
We ignore the need to sleep. We ignore the need to pee. We ignore the need to drink or eat or any of those, anything. I mean, to this day, 25 years later, I don't actually notice the signals that say you're sleepy. Great sleep hygiene. I taught myself that. But my point in this is that there's a lot of value in reconnecting with what are those early signals my body sends, because my body is sending me signals about how safe I feel long before my prefrontal starts to pick up on them, long before. And if I can cue into what my brain, what my system is picking up as unsafe early enough, I can actually get curious about it and say, oh, am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable? Because our brains do read uncomfortable and unsafe the same way, especially if it's significant discomfort, especially if we've not experienced this type of discomfort before, right? For our med students, our residents, this becomes really, really important. Learner safety isn't about feeling okay all the time. It's actually about feeling very not okay sometimes, because we're pushing you to grow. That's
right.
the job. We're pushing you to do things. That's the job. So it isn't about making everything safe in the sense of I feel good, I feel okay, comfort,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Comfort is the right word. When we misinterpret those two things, right, and get activated, that's a problem. Also, sometimes because our threshold for activation, which I used in place of triggered, and we can come back to that later if we need to, but when we lower that activation threshold, we can start misinterpreting or miscuing what we're actually engaging with, right? I start to equate or conflate the cute little fluffy bunny with a face-eating bear.
Yes. Yes.
And that's human.
Conflation.
Yeah, that's a human thing. And then here's the real kicker, I think, right now. The real kicker is the impact of chronic uncertainty on the human nervous system. And it really can't be overstated. In fact, the War College runs a 9-month course on how one maps and navigates uncertainty, mapping uncertainty. Okay, why does this matter? Because the impact of chronic high threat uncertainty on the nervous system is absolutely exhausting.
Yes.
It, again, upregulates our scanning. It lowers our threshold. It diminishes all of the sort of the autonomic functions that we rely on that help us conserve energy. All of that falls by the wayside. It increases our cognitive biases, including negativity bias, loss aversion bias, and I think this is the most important part or damning part of the whole thing, is it diminishes our brain's capacity to receive safety signals. So I'm scanning more diligently. I'm reacting more explosively to whatever it is that I encounter, right? Small things become big, big things become huge. And my brain stops even picking up whatever signals may be coming at me that say I'm safe. This is a recipe for catastrophe.
Yes.
So metabolically speaking, uncertainty is unbelievably taxing, is a very high ATP state. And you push people into very high uncertainty and you leave them there for a really prolonged period of time. And the brain begins seeking an either or answer, a binary. And the reality is, very, very rarely is the answer in the binary, right? Those days with an absolute wrong and an absolute right tend to end in a body count.
It is an energy-saving cognitive distortion that leads down very bad roads.
That's
for
exactly
relationships
right.
And for city-states and countries.
This is exactly right. And yet when you think about how much uncertainty has been injected, how long we have asked people to swim in uncertainty. I mean, I just think back to COVID. And look, being able to be in that mess of uncertainty for a prolonged period of time, that also is a muscle that gets flexed,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there is capacity that we may have that can be increased in this, but at the
Mhm.
end of the day, we are these biological creatures who just run out of ATP, and some run out of it sooner. So just
Yes.
thinking back to 2020, right? Healthcare heroes, mask up to save everyone. I mean, there was a period of time, it was short. We almost don't remember it, but there was a period of time when we really came together to support, to protect, where there
Yes, and
was some
remembering the
under.
pots and pans banging on the porches for that one moment.
Yeah. I mean, there was a period of time, right? Now, fear, the initial, fear drove us towards that, but there was some period of time where that existed. And the challenge was, I think, in public health, um, as is always true in public health, the messaging of this was very hard. It was very challenging because people do want clear, concrete, um, binary, right? Or they at least want clear, concrete answers and steps. And the challenge with science is that science, by definition, doesn't have an answer. We are continually seeking the next thing. And if you haven't been trained in the scientific process, if you haven't been trained in what underpins public health and good public health procedure and policy, this begins to look like a bunch of people who don't know what the hell they're doing that are telling us to stay indoors and mask up, and right. The perception got very, very skewed of why things kept changing, not because people were idiots, but because we were all figuring it out at the same time, right? And what that meant. And so then what
Yes.
does I don't want to say the untrained brain, but the brain that is unaccustomed to that level of prolonged uncertainty begin to do? It gets exhausted.
Mhm.
And we saw it go into, I mean, listen, there were folks who locked themselves down and in and just two extremes that were detrimental to their health, not just their socio-emotional well-being, but their physical health, because they weren't getting checked on things that needed to be checked on.
Yeah.
And on the other side, right, we had folks who get diagnosed with COVID in the ER and deliberately coughed in their doctor's face. I mean,
Mm.
these are not made up stories. That's what happens when the brain's like, I can't take it anymore. I got to get a rest.
And this is reminding me of our current moment, prolonged moment of identity politics, because identification feels like certainty, which feels like a dopamine hit, right? And opposition to that identity or certainty has been evoking disgust and disdain and disconnection rather than curiosity embedded in connection. And that does make it so hard to connect, which makes it impossible to mitigate that trauma. I mean, we can connect within a group, but then we're still swirling around in our echo chambers, getting more and more hits of that dopamine certainty, identity reinforcement.
Yeah. The shortest distance between two people is story.
Yes.
It is very, very challenging for me to sit and bear witness to someone's story and feel disgust, disdain,
Yes.
all of those emotions that you talk about, those drivers, those things that drive us apart. And as you correctly point out, the challenge right now is, how do we access that story? How do we access a story that is different than mine?
Absolutely. And we're recording this the week after Charlie Kirk was shot. And so this will play some weeks after that, but everyone will remember this week. They
Mhm.
had somebody in their life who had a different response to
Absolutely.
this. And it's been
Well,
surprising to me to find out how differently we are being sort of fed information and pandered to, and that they are simultaneously opposing truths.
I think that's I like that framing. And I want to be clear in the same way that I was clear when 500 shots were fired at the CDC a few weeks ago. I mean, which we've already forgotten and moved on from, right?
I don't even
500 shots. This was a domestic terror attack
I don't
on the
think I even heard
CDC.
about this.
Um, naming things correctly is really, really important,
Whew.
right? Charlie Kirk was assassinated
Mhm.
for the words he said. For the words he said is what it appears to be, right?
Mhm.
And the hallmark of America, the foundation of America, is that while the things you say may make my blood boil, you have the right to say them as I have the right to my full-throated rebuttal.
Yeah.
And the silencing of that is a fucking tragedy. Every single time it happens.
In
Every
whatever
single time
direction it
it happens.
happens.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that is really important that you already alluded to, and I would really encourage every single one of us to explore is the danger of a single story. Frankly, is the danger of a single story. Because there is very much a single story that is being circulated in two very different camps. I don't know how even to say that without othering us.
Mhm.
But I am telling you that one news feed, whether that's a news feed or a Facebook news feed or an Instagram news feed or whatever you want to call it, right? One news feed is presenting only a certain version and the other only a certain version. It matters what we say. To be perfectly honest, I did not know. I mean, I think the name, but I did not know much of anything about Charlie Kirk
Me neither.
prior to his assassination.
I had to look up who he was.
Right. And because I do know that algorithms and churn, right, and echo chambers and confirmation bias all are going to lead to very, very specific conclusions for me. They are not allowing me to come to my own conclusions. They are concluding for me and feeding to me. I was very aggressive about figuring all of reading, watching, listening so that my conclusions were actually mine. Now, this is really important because I don't think we do this very often. But I also think that what can happen quickly is once I've decided that my position is right, particularly when it is a position rooted in my morals and my ethics, I can begin to shut down the human being sitting next to me who is having a very different lived experience with this. And it is important to me that I stay in conversation with people whose lived experience is very different from mine, if only because I don't know how the story ends. And I fully believe that I cannot possibly ever hope to move the story or growth for anyone in the direction of love, peace, acceptance, joy, kindness, if I am unwilling to be proximate. And that is a very, very, very privileged position I am able to take. I want to say that because that's important. This is not something everyone can, needs to, or is expected to do. I have no expectation. It is something that I am sometimes more willing and more able to do than other times, but is important to me because when we lose dialogue, we lose.
Yes. It calls me to say, too, resolving difference is not the goal.
No,
Relating across difference is the goal.
There's a difference. Yes, there's a difference between dialogue and debate.
Yeah. Yes.
Certain things I will not debate. I will not debate my humanity. That's not up for debate.
Yeah.
Right? My
Yeah.
full personhood, your full personhood, my friend's full personhood. That is not up for debate. Dialoguing, however, has to be a part of our experience because all genocide begins with language. And if I allow myself to think that I am exempt from that, I'm lying. All genocide begins with language, and it is the language of other.
It's so powerful. That is a powerful truth.
And it's a really, really, I think it's a pretty short, it can become a very short path when fear and disgust and disdain all get crowded in there with it. Wow, that got dark.
That got deep and dark. But it's good to grapple. It's good to grapple in this conversation because, we also live in this 24-hour period where we're going to giggle and enjoy connecting and hug someone, hopefully. And that also exists. And so deeply understanding the darkness without being swallowed by it is what I hope we can offer a vision of in this conversation. We can't, Pollyanna our way into joy in the midst of this moment. We have to be an integrated resource for ourselves, for the people that we impact, for the people who need to see another human grappling and including joy despite many reasons to be downtrodden.
Yes. I think that that language of other, those over there, rather than we, us, rather than the language of connection, is a pretty short path to hate. And when you couple hate with fear, and there's more than enough of that going around right now, nothing good comes of that. That is a combination that will have you doing unthinkable things and justifying them in your mind. Germany, at the beginning of Hitler's rise to power, was filled with Germans who did not agree with their whole chest with what he was doing, right? And did not fight with their whole chest what was happening. You know what we call those people today? We call them Nazis. Right? So I think that becomes the question. If you ever wondered who you would be in history. I have a very, very dear friend who is a Black descendant of formerly enslaved Americans. And there's a mental exercise I know they have done at times. Like, who would this person that I'm engaged with have been in the day? Right?
Yeah.
Who do I think I would have been? Who would I have been? Who would I have wanted to be?
Right.
Looking back at those times, and are my
quietly
actions
complicit
today
or inaction?
Yeah, are my actions today in alignment with who I want to be? With the story I want told about me at the end of all of this? And the answer to that is, in my life, always no. Because I have like visions of superhero dumb, and it's good to have at least that thing that you're shooting for, because another truth is that we just become more of what we do every single day.
Yes.
We become more of who we are. So the invitation is to choose carefully, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have, by the way, in case you're wondering, I don't know if this is video or not, but I have 2 mugs of coffee in front of me.
What is the difference between the two?
One is colder than the other.
That's hilarious. Oh, coffeeed up. Yes. How we spend our time is how we spend our lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, flex the muscle, right? joy is a muscle to be flexed. I think hope is a muscle to be flexed. And I would say that courage is as well.
Yes.
Courage is a muscle to be flexed. I think most of us probably have some thought somewhere in our heads that when called upon, there will be a moment of great valor, right? Like we will step up and behave as we intend
Yes.
in the critical moment. And I think that's foolishly romantic.
Agree.
I think that courage is a muscle that is flexed in 1,000 small ways.
Yeah.
Leading up to the big moment when we make a decision about what we're worth and what our beliefs are worth.
Yes. I'm enjoying that we went here and feeling also what I imagine many listeners might be feeling, which is a swirl of like, but what can I do? Right? But what can I do? We know that posting our thoughts on social media is not the same as activism. That we can be in echo chambers and we can do, values signaling is what I'm going to call it rather than virtue signaling, but we can signal and we can try to communicate, and we can also join people in the streets. We can put our bodies at risk, especially those of us who have privilege to do so. I also acknowledge that that sounds pretty frightening for people who haven't done that much before.
We can support food banks and we can knock on a neighbor's door.
Yeah.
It adds to or detracts from a collective whole. And I think that that's actually really, really important because I think it's one of the places that people get stuck. If I can't do everything, then I can't do anything. And I am just going to be the first one to put my hand in the air and say that I can fall into that, right? Like, but the reality is that we can start really close in with the next encounter that we have, with remembering that every single person around us, just like me, is scanning just like I am. And that every single person around us, just like me, has a nervous system that has been in overdrive for a pretty long time. And maybe this is assumptive. Maybe this is an overgeneralization. Let's say it's 80%. Even if it's 80%, even if it's 60%.
Yeah.
I would say we're all safer if I don universal precautions and behave as if, and then decide how I'm going to show up. How am I, because I can't control all the things out there. I am really, at the end of the day, I have zilcho power. I can choose how I'm going to show up for the next person and the person after that and the person after that. Whether I'm going to be a cue of safety for them or whether I'm going to further heighten their nervous system, further activate their nervous system. So there's those kinds of things I think also matter.
As a witness to you being in the world, I will take this moment to reflect that you have a established practice of being a cue for safety, a place of warmth and resource. And I just want to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you. And so I would ask you, because this is maybe instructive. What do you notice? Right? Because those things, they're not accidental.
That's right.
Right? So what are the things that you notice? Because when we name the things we notice that make us feel safer, when we're explicit in that way, not only do then those become the things that maybe we put into practice, but that also tells the people around us, oh, what cues safety, right? I say be a cue of safety. And people are like, what the hell is this woman talking about? Be a cue of safety. Okay, I'll walk around with a white flag.
Yes. I would say that there are expressive facial expressions, expressive cues, warm eye contact. There are other, body language signals too, probably, that my nervous system recognizes, but I might not even always be able to vocalize. There's vocal modulation. there's pacing, and there's attention, like how one attends to the other. So those are things that come to mind as I think across various interactions, knowing that this is your practice in the world and it's really important to you. I have
Good noticing.
experience of being, a resource and warmth to people. And I also have experience of having people, perceive me as intimidating. And
Mm.
I don't wish to ever be intimidating. um, it makes me smile and laugh to think what a goofball I am at karaoke and that people could possibly find that same person intimidating. And also, it's true based on what am I doing with my own nervous system signaling. How safe do I feel in that moment? What is happening in the invisible world of power dynamics in these moments?
What a beautiful noticing that is right there, too, right? Because what I heard you call in is that power and privilege come into play as well,
Yes.
right? And when one of the things that I notice is that when I am feeling less safe, when I am feeling less comfortable, when I am feeling under threat for whatever reason, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be face eating bear threat, right? It can be professional threat. It can, whatever. I fall back to Professor Sarraf.
Mhm.
I can get really, together and I can go into like neuroscientific mode and we're going to talk about we know this. We
Yes.
recognize professor mode
We don a whole
and
other body and sit
yes,
differently.
I send my body double in, right? And actually, much in the same way, I had to retrain myself to notice what was happening from here down. Actually, that had become such a familiar persona for so many years, because again, that's part of our training in academia, that it really took me some time to notice when to step into it, because sometimes it's worth stepping into, sometimes, but I want it to be a choice, not a default. I
Yeah.
want it to be choiceful and purposeful, not because I am afraid, but because I am deliberately trying to convey something in that moment. And part of unlearning or relearning, right, that pattern was the little sticky note that I had on my computer for a long time. It's like default to your humanity, right? When you're teaching, when you're speaking, when you're whatevering, default to your humanity. If I do that, I am much less likely to do harm. And that's our whole ethos. Do no harm.
Yeah.
Lead with that. And for me to lead with that, that means I have to remember to default to my humanity, not my professorship, not my doctorship, not my whatevership, defaulting
Mm,
back to humanness.
that is such a pithy, potent pivot also for identity politics, right? Default to your
Yeah.
humanity. If
Yeah.
you are on the far left or the far right of any given experience, default to your humanity. We're going to meet somewhere in the middle if we all default to our humanity.
I heard someone say the other day, they said, I love humanity. It's humans I don't like.
Yes.
And I thought about that for a while and I thought, I get I got what they were driving at, right? And
Yep.
it was a joke that was, I
Yep.
thought the reality is I really like humans. I mean, it comes back to that the shortest distance between two people is story, right? In public health, we go to where the humans are, ideally. In the second responder work that we do, right? We go to where the people are. We don't expect them to come to us. And when
Yeah.
you go, you are instantly transported into their story. And that's such a valuable, privileged opportunity to connect and to grow and to stay out of that danger of a single story as well.
It really is. Speaking of story, tell me about the turning point for you. How did you enter this force field of trauma informed work? What, I'm going to use the word radicalized you. What is that story?
It's a long one.
Okay, what's the
Well,
podcast
it's a
length
it's a
version?
long one, and like it's a thread that runs through my life. So
Yeah.
I'll try to pick a few key moments. So I think it's important to say that I went to public health. I got my master's in public health before I went to medical school. I didn't understand this was important until several years after I completed residency, actually. And what dawned on me was that I just took a different approach than my colleagues who went to medical school
Hmm.
first, right? Medical school is about the patient in front of you. Public health is about the context, right?
Yeah.
And so for
Yeah.
me, it was always about the patient in context.
You could see the forest and the trees. Hmm.
Yes, and I just didn't know that that was different. I
Hmm.
honestly, I didn't see that had informed my experience differently than many of my colleagues. And so then in the early aughts, we had now moved to central Illinois, and I was in the process of sort of building up and out a public health intervention that eventually turned into a nonprofit organization around child health, family health, wellness, community health, and wellness. And I was doing research because that's what one does, right? On what was the data showing us about the childhood obesity epidemic? Is it as straightforward? The answer is no, because nothing ever is. Is it as straightforward as too much TV and, too much? I think at the time it was we were just blaming sugar in television or whatever. Okay.
Hmm.
And I came across the ACEs study,
Hmm.
which had its birth in an obesity clinic. So the
Hmm.
original researcher, one of the original researchers, Dr. Vince Felitti, was an obesity physician in California, internist. So that's how I stumbled across the study. I mean, it was like
Yeah.
one of those moments, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I just remember thinking that. And so I went on to, become, and by this time, SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, had recognized the power of this study. And it was a very powerful study, frankly, and had, begun to implement this as a public health initiative, sort of writ large, but really had developed sort of those SAMHSA principles of trauma-informed care, trauma-informed practices. And I went through all of that, became a trainer, the whole thing. And for the next however many years that I ran Gen H Kids, it was central to what we did, right? So our programs were based in trauma-informed best practices. Our board was trained, our staff and volunteers were all trained. We did this over and over and over again. So it had become sort of the air I breathe. And that was about 13 to 15 years. It closed it in 2018. What became apparent to me as I was sort of reading everything I could read, learning, evolving the practice, and what it meant to teach this, as well as what it meant to be this or become this, which is actually more to the point. And I got that language from Ibram Kendi when he talks about becoming anti-racist. There's no being, there's no finish line, right?
Hmm.
What I really tuned into was the fact that so many organizations, institutions, etc., that claimed to be trauma informed, what it really boiled down to, was that there had been a training, right, a knowledge acquisition, the exchange of some knowledge about trauma and trauma informed practices. The basic trainings that were being taught back in the day were, a couple hours, and it was boiled down to basically a list of do's and don'ts that applied to them. So immediately you're othering, right? Them, whoever them is, them, the client, them, the patient, them, the whatever, right? And I want to be really, really clear here. I'm not dismissing or diminishing that, because the field of trauma is younger than me in many ways. But the arc of this has been pushing towards this idea that it really has to be, in my opinion, has to be about recognizing that it's not about you, it's about how we are engaging with each other. And that, again, coming back to, if I am taking these things and saying it's just those people over there
Yeah.
and not recognizing and acknowledging, oh, it's actually me too,
100%
right?
penetrance.
Thank you, right? That I have the same nervous system, that I have the same scanning for threat, be it social threat or physical threat, that my hardwiring is the same as everyone else's, then I am really just clinically distancing myself and saying, yeah, you people over there, let me come take care of you. It's very paternalistic, and it's not as helpful as it is when I say, yeah, we are all the walking wounded,
Yes.
including me. And there is an opportunity for those wounds to become incredible sources of wisdom if I can skill myself to that transition. And so, this concept, which seems to be everywhere now, but this idea of it being beyond trauma informed, and I started talking about like we need trauma responsive engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And this was back in 2015, 2016, which was about the same time that I got tricked into attending coach training. And this is a truth, verifiable. This was fairly early in Joseph's diagnosis. My eldest son had been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And it sort of, as that does when it's your child, it sort of brought a screeching halt to a whole lot of things. And Joseph is fine, dear listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a very extended period of time where I stepped away from everything. I had the privilege to do that. My husband's a physician as well. And so we were able to be okay with me being home to take care of him. And as my dear friend, who's also a physician, said, run a damn ICU out of your living room. It wasn't quite that extreme, though at times it felt it. And she banged on my door in February of 2015 and said, I've talked to Jeff. He's home this weekend. You and I are going on a trip in February. Where are we going? We're going to Baltimore. Baltimore in February? Really? She says, you need CME. We're going to get CME. I'm like, there's not CME in Hawaii or something. She says, come on, we're going to Baltimore. I may have argued with her a little longer. And finally, I think she won me over with the promise of room service. So I trundle off. Now it is a testament to how underwater I was that I didn't even ask her what kind of CME we were going after, right? I'm just like, whatever, room service, zombie. We get to Baltimore and show up, and it's a very small group of 9. And we get started in this, and it is a coach training intensive for physicians. And I grabbed my girlfriend at the first break and dragged her outside. And I said, what have you done? And why didn't you tell me? And she says, see that look on your face? That look? That's why I didn't tell you. Get your ass back in there, Sarraf, and learn the things. What I will tell you about that experience was it was quite life altering for me. And I will fully, and I've said this on other podcasts, fully admit that really coaching had evoked the largest of eye rolls from me prior to this. I mean, just like pop them out of my head and skittle across the floor kind of eye roll, right? And what I learned, to my everlasting benefit, I was going to say to my shame, but actually to my everlasting benefit, is that I don't know shit about anything. And it was about time that I really figured that out again. It wasn't the first time I had been taught this. But it was almost like, I had all of this vision here, but somebody removed so I could have the vision on this side as well. There was this entire skill set that I realized, professional skill set I want to add, that I realized I didn't have, that I didn't even know existed, and that by God was going to make me a better doctor, mother, wife, friend, clinician, all of the things. And it was very pivotal, so much so, well, 2 things. The woman who trained me now is one of my partners, because I was like, you got to come and do this with me. And then I called one of my childhood best friends from the airport on the way home, and I was like, I got to tell you what I just went through, and sort of offloaded all of this. It was really shocking. So I decided that I was going to very bespokey, side giggy, whatever you want to call it, just work with physicians, right? I was just going to do this little tiny what I hoped would be helpful to my colleagues around physician burnout. Okay, because this is 2016 now. I'm accredited, and I'm like, okay, burnout's a thing. We were hearing about it. I was seeing it, that's for sure. And so I started doing a little bit of coaching, and as I'm doing it, I'm like, oh, honey, that ain't burnout. That's trauma. Right. And it was just one of those things that was so clear to me, so clear to me. And more important than that, because you don't name other people's trauma for them. So you don't tell them, you just let them come to it. But you can kind of get the background and the understanding. What really became very clear to me was that I was having some good success in this paradigm of coaching, largely because I didn't realize I was doing it. Right. So I'm bringing all of these coaching practices and skills, but I have, already 15 years of trauma responsive underpinning all of this. And it was working. It was working really well, to the point that I was starting to get some calls from hospital systems saying, hey, can you teach us how to do this? And because I always know now, not before, I know what I don't know, I reached back to the woman who trained me and said, hey, I'm being asked about this. What do you think? This was a couple years later. And I remember I was sitting in my basement because I heard this like gasp as I'm explaining to her what it is that I'm doing now. Antoinette is a absolutely brilliant coach. She spent her career in the coaching industry, has coached in some of the biggest places and developed all kinds of programs around this. And she said to me, I remember this, she said, this is what's been missing. This is what's been missing. This is gonna, oh, I'm in kind of thing. So that, oh, we got a thing. This will change everything. Yeah, no. I mean, the medical field was still very resistant to coaching at this time. Now we're 2018, 2019. And the coaching industry is like, yeah, screw you. That trauma word smacks of therapy, and that ain't what we do, rightly. They are correct, right? But sort of breaking those two walls simultaneously felt at times like it wasn't going to happen. Like COVID did it for me. So,
lucky break.
by the end of 2020, there was this new recognition and understanding and willingness to sort of step into the impact of traumatic stress exposure. And I really want to be clear about this, because the thing I worry about now isn't that people are unwilling to recognize and see and name, right, traumatic stress or trauma. It is now that everything's becoming trauma. And that's not right either, right? It is not a weapon to be flung. It is not an excuse that you throw out there that excuses bad shenaniganing. It is none of those things. And it is also not something that you throw out in an attempt to make your life easier, right?
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Traumatic stress exposure and trauma are not the same thing. And there's a moment between the exposure and the, not a moment, but there's a period of time between the exposure and the embodiment where we can choose what we're going to do if we want to disrupt it. That's where all the hope is, as far as I'm concerned. That's the joy in all of this. We can, I don't know how much I'm allowed to swear on your podcast. We can do something about this.
You can swear, Kemia. It's totally okay.
It is not fucking inevitable.
Yes, thank you. Yes, no holds barred.
It is not inevitable. And loves of my life in all walks of life, my students, my residents, my colleagues, my children, my friends, my siblings, my all of those things. Hey, traumatic stress exposure is going to happen.
Yes.
So let's skill ourselves for what we do when it does. The job is hard. The job is supposed to be hard. Medicine is supposed to be hard. Yes, it is supposed to be hard. We are signing up to expose ourselves day in and day out to traumatic stress. That's the job.
Yeah, it is a choice.
It is a choice. And, right, the fact that we made that choice and that decision doesn't mean, right, that becoming traumatized, having trauma, and that trauma becoming embedding in us is inevitable.
Yeah.
The challenge is helping to recognize, okay, look, traumatic stress exposure is inevitable, and I need to do something with that exposure in the moment. I often say, listen, if I'm running a coach, you don't want me feeling my feelings.
That's true.
Compartmentalization is incredibly useful and powerful.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes, yes.
And if I don't know what to do after, and that's the part we're not taught. What do I do after? What is okay for me to do after? What do I get to do after? What do I need to do after? And it's different for different people. What's available for me to do after? What am I seeing other people, right? What am I seeing other people do?
The people around me, especially a generation above me, tend to never, ever, ever show that it ever impacted them at all. So is something wrong with me that I am feeling this later on and I don't know how to discharge this trauma from my body?
And guess what? They did feel it.
Yes.
I have been in rooms. I will never forget this, and I'm not going to disclose any names here at all, but I will never forget being in a room with one of the gods, right? I mean, we know the gods of medicine. Mm-hmm. We know them when we encounter them in the hall. We knew them when we were walking the halls as residents. We know Absolutely. Who these people are. Mm-hmm. I will never forget being in a room. And this was a room that they had chosen to enter into because they wanted, at the very end of their career, approaching 70, the very end of their career, wanted to reclaim something, their words. And you know what, when invited into story, what they went back to? A story from their intern year. A story from their intern year that they had carried forever with them. And the pain they had carried with them forever. There were no mistakes in this story. There were nothing done inappropriately or wrong in this story. This wasn't I killed this patient and none of that. Just, they lost a bit of their humanity because they didn't have anywhere to go to process the pain of that encounter. Yeah. And so we tuck it away and we think that's what we're supposed to do. And then we tuck away the next one and we tuck away the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And it's like these thin layers of veneer that we put on over until we're just shellacked. We're hard. And then our students break themselves against that. And our patients broke themselves against that. And that is not why we went into this.
No, that is tragedy.
Yeah.
That is tragedy.
So how do we unshellac ourselves? Deshellackification. Yes, I don't care how we term it, right? We cannot expect that the people around us, or the people, particularly the kids, they're not kids, they are grown-ass adults, but in my brain, they're kids, right? That the kids know how to lead, although they sometimes are better than we are. Or at a minimum, they recognize they need something. Somebody give me something, right? Because I want to hang on to my humanity. It's very, very important that we model and we offer opportunity. Boundary vulnerability, okay? This is not falling apart and bleeding our pain out all over the place. That's not what we're calling for. But taking a beat to say, that was really hard. And that one really hurt me. And I'm going to take a minute, or I'm going to take a little bit of time. Would anyone like to grab a cup of coffee with me? Yes. We don't have to talk about it. I'm not asking you to feel your feeling. I'm just telling you, I need a beat. We just started to model it.
Yes.
Right? And we're putting them in choice. I am not about forced processing. We don't force ventilation. We don't force processing. We can model it, though, gently and repeatedly and invitationally. And in doing so, particularly when you're the intimidating one, right?
You're the
Which
leader.
Every attending is, when you are the intimidating one, you've just offered a path, an option that is different than shellacking. Deshellackification. I think we should trademark it.
Deshellackification it is. Thank you for all of the places that this conversation just went. Kemia, so wonderful. Wonderful to hear and just have discourse with you and learn as always. It is a pleasure. So glad that you are
Back at
out
ya.
there spreading this work. May this ripple out and impact everyone who needs to hear a message of encouragement and clarification today. May it be so. Thanks again to the one and only, the fabulous Dr. K. What an amazing conversation. I'm so grateful to have gotten to have this conversation and also to share it with all of you. If you would like to learn more about Dr. Sarraf's offerings, please check out Lodestar, Lode starpc.com, where you can find out about trauma-informed coaching resources, consulting resources, and True North, her very own coaching certification program. Next week, I am delighted to be joined by my friend and another extremely accomplished Renaissance woman and physician coach, Dr. Sarah Seidelman. Cannot wait to see you there. And if you're a physician coach or coaching curious, the Physician Coaching Summit is coming up. We would love to see you there. Details are at thephysiciancoachingsummit.com. As always, a quick note before we go, I'm a doctor, but not your doctor. This podcast is for education and connection only and is not to be construed as medical advice. Please speak with your own clinician about your specific situation. Deep thanks, as always, to our fabulous producer, Kelsey Vaughn, to Sue, my partner in all the adventures, and to you. I'm so glad you're here. You're the reason we make this show. Thank you for spending this part of your day with us. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Be kind to each other, and may we all keep solving for joy. See you next time.